radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Oops. There I am. Welcome, Fade to Black. Today's Monday, December 5th, 2022. Welcome, everybody. Tonight, our guest is Grant Cameron. He's been a UFO researcher since 1975. He's an author, Charlie Red Star, amongst other books. Of course, his website is presidentialufo.com. And I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black our good friend, Grant Cameron. Grant, good evening, young man. How you doing?
Not too bad. Jimmy, how are you?
It's another night with Grant, man. I'm excited.
We got some stuff. Some stuff to discuss.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to do. Before we get started, happy holidays. We just got, we do Thanksgiving a couple of weeks after you guys, but we got through that. And the holidays are upon us. Are you ready?
Ready. I don't do much these days, not like the old days with the family, but it's my assistant was just back into Winnipeg, and she actually, Desta, I don't know if you know Desta, but she had Christmas yesterday. So we're sort of getting used to, when the families travel around and you can't be there for Christmas, you come in early or whatever. So I'll be seeing my son, maybe he lives in Vancouver. I'll be going there after Christmas, maybe a month after Christmas, and celebrate there. But it's we got the snow, so that's all we need.
Yeah, that's it. That's always the indicator. Yeah. For me, I've got two red bows on my front doors. So that lets me know that we're in the season. So, but happy holidays. Yeah, I had a little holiday dinner get together party over the weekend, and it was great having friends over. And it's just kind of strange how the last 2-3 years with everything that the world went through. I think all of us are getting acclimated to getting back out and doing things again. It's just like a weird feeling how we had it drilled down on us for so long, and it just feels weird. Feels right, but it's going to take a minute.
I think that's why your economy, it keeps heating up and heating up as more and more people come out of the woodwork to start and hire people and get things going. And so it's like you wait for the unemployment to draw, the employment, but more and more people are getting hired, and it's because everything is moving from dead stop to full speed.
How? Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Let me ask you this: does the Canadian? I'm not talking about what I get from the news or Economist or whatever. Forget about that. I'm just asking you, my friend Grant Cameron, a resident of Canada. Does the Canadian economy run alongside ours? If we're doing good, you guys do good. If we fall off, do you guys fall off, or is it completely independent?
Yeah, ours does, except in 2008 when your housing market crashed because of the way you lend money. Ours didn't crash. So in 2008, we didn't have a crash, but otherwise we go into the dump the same as you, because it's pretty linked together with the car industry, and everything is pretty much linked. We all watch American TV, and everybody lives along the border, so it's pretty much just like the 51st state.
Yeah. That I assume that. The strange thing, and I know you're aware of this. The United States has got a real issue with blinders in that they think the rest of the world is like they don't pay attention to anything out there. It's always just the United States. And to that degree, it's weird. We barely know we have a country to the north of us and another one to the south of us. we we don't know much about Canada. We don't know much about Mexico. And it's just a really, really strange thing. We barely know Canada is there, probably because you guys are so polite and quiet most of the time. But
But we always did notice that we used to make make jokes about it. And there was actually a TV show that said talking to Americans that talked about how Americans really don't know anything outside themselves. We live right north of North Dakota, so we would always, in the days when the things were cheaper in the States, they're not cheaper in the States anymore, but when we used to go down to Grand Forks and Fargo to shop, and we used to play these games with American money, and you'd have these kids who were like out of high school, 18, working in the restaurant, and they look and say, "What's this?" We say, "Oh, it's Canadian money," and they go, "Canadian money," and they'd never seen it before, and we're going, "Wow!" And this is only like 50 or 75 miles from the border, where you get this sort of a divide where you guys have your news is basically American news, whereas ours is more like British news, where it's like the BBC, where it's like world news section, and then the local news comes after that. But yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy between your country and ours. Ours, everybody seems to know what's going on in the United States. We all, even my family, it's all political, and we have these fights about who should be thrown in jail and all this kind of stuff. It's really and it's like my mother really gets into it, my sister, and it's like, what are you getting so upset? You can't vote for her anyway. It's like, but they're like ready to die for certain people that are running in the American government, and they can't vote. It's just bizarre.
I don't do politics on this show, right? I avoid it. I don't do politics in my personal life either, by the way. But anyway, I saw a video clip and a news story on media down here talking about Canada, which is a rare thing. Women protesting about Trudeau and taking it to the streets.
Yeah, that's a big thing here. It's like to fight the government, where ours is more. I can sort of get into the disclosure thing we had with Lou and Chris when it all fell apart with the Canadians. But we have this thing in Canada where the government is run by the Prime Minister, whereas yours, you have three branches of government, and the spending is done by the Congress. And we could not get this through to Lou and to Chris how this thing operated, where the president the Prime Minister just runs everything, except in terms of oil. Everybody blamed him for the gas prices, the same as in the States, you blame the president for, and it's like, well, he's got nothing to do with the gas prices. And so the president or the prime minister here takes a lot of flack, and he's pretty flamboyant. His father was the prime minister many years ago, and very outspoken, very flamboyant. And a lot of women liked him because he was, a very handsome type guy. But a lot of people really don't like him, and we have this sort of divide there, whether you're for him or against him. But he's in power for the next 4 years, and people like to protest. The Canadians were never like that. They were more like, they just, whatever happens. Now they're getting more like Americans, where they'll go to the streets and they'll protest and stuff like that. That never really happened in Canada. We're sort of like famous for saying I'm sorry and stuff like that. We just sort of take our place.
And it's the same thing with UFOs, though.
Yeah.
It here for some reason. And there's a lot of reasons behind this. It's not just one specific thing, for sure, but for some reason, you follow the community. We think UFOs and ET contact is an American thing. Yeah. And when another country has a photograph or an opinion or a video, we act surprised. It's like, wait a minute, this is an Earth thing. Yeah. It's not an American thing. But most of the stories and the history and the lore around UFOs started here, have a progenitor here in the United States.
Yeah, and you're famous, like I used to make the joke, like Area 51 is known everywhere in the world. I mean, you could even go to China and they'd be talking, and you say Area 51, and the Chinese will, even though they don't speak, oh, I know what that is, Area 51 and stuff like that. In Canada, it's the same thing. People used to ask me the thing about, well, what's going on in Canada? And I say, I haven't got the foggiest notion what's going on in Canada, because the Canadians, the government never talked about it. Nobody ever asked them. We don't have any UFO groups. We don't have any conferences, anything like that. And then I always took the sort of the joke that I was the Canadian guy who was doing the U.S. presidents. That's the thing, is we sort of know the whole U.S. History of UFOs and the presidents and stuff like that. We know what's going on American TV. We're all plugged in and fighting for various Republicans and Democrats and stuff like that, even though we can't vote. And that's the thing, is we're so tied in that it is true. I believe that around the world, the American thing, everybody seems to consider UFOs to be an American thing, except you get the odd one like the Virginia case and stuff like that. But other than that, it's still an American phenomenon. It sort of dominates. And maybe that's because of the news, the way it's put out, or the way it's publicized. Because you even get that in the United States, you get a split between states. For example, on the East Coast, I'm kind of glad they finally got a conference there, where they're running this conference now, which is pretty popular, and they got some big name speakers. But there was never any UFO conferences on the East Coast of the United States, just maybe a little tiny one. Whereas in California, it was always like, this is like Flake City, where like every town's got a conference, and all the big conferences like Consciousness Life Expo and all these conferences, the big ones are in California, and outside of there you really don't have that much. And that's what the Canadian thing is. The MUFON would run conferences. I think they ran 2 conferences here, or maybe one conference. But other than that, there's really no conferences in Canada. There's no big UFO groups. There's no, and so when people ask me what's going on in Canada in terms of UFOs, I said I haven't got a foggiest clue. Like when we were dealing with Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, they were giving us this thing. They're doing a threat narrative. So it's national security in the United States, and they were saying, well, you follow our plan, and they had the plan where you get the military people and you get their cases, and you say the UFOs are in your airspace and all this sort of stuff. And I said, we don't have any cases like that. We can't do that. I mean, and they said, well, then you get it on your armed forces committee, and then they will allocate money. And we said, well, the committees can't allocate any money. It's the prime minister runs the whole thing. The committees can do whatever they want, but they're not part of it's tied into the government. They have to ask the prime minister for money. So we were trying to explain this to them, that we don't have any military cases. Our military people aren't going to do anything. And the Canadians wanted to run this scientific investigation. And Chris, and not so much Lou, but Chris wouldn't have anything to do with that. It was like, no, you can't do it that way. And we're saying, and the Canadians who we had almost 10 MPs that were ready to out themselves and jump on board and say, yeah, we want this thing investigated. And the way it was going to work in the Canadians, we don't have any military thing where we can, use the military. And so what they were going to do is they were going to have a woman in the prime minister's office who actually has come forward now. And she's like a science advisor to the prime minister. So she wanted to cover, and we were going to provide her cover for her coming out and saying, we need to investigate UFOs, but scientifically. And what happened is when Chris Mellon heard that, he said, that's the poison pill. I'm gone. I'm out of here. And he didn't want a scientific investigation. He wanted this military thing where we were going to do this military thing. We said we don't have any military witnesses. The military committees can't do anything. We just couldn't get it across to them. And so they shut down the whole thing. And these 10 guys basically are now still in the closet as to who they are and their interest in UFOs. And it comes from all 3 parties. It's not just one party. But they wanted to come forward. And that's the difference in Canada. Is Canada wanted to do a scientific investigation. We don't have a big military. We sort of hand it off to the Americans. We don't have any nuclear weapons. We say, we give our money to NATO, and the Americans will provide the things. And we have build F-35 jet fighters for Lockheed, and everybody's happy, and we buy our jet fighters, and we buy stuff all from the Americans and stuff like that. But we really don't control anything. The American military still calls the shot. We're sort of like we just take orders from them. But this whole deal with we realized this idea that it was in the U.S. This whole disclosure thing is based upon this military thing, this threat to national security and stuff like that. In Canada, we go like threat to national security, like. I mean, what the heck? What's the score in a hockey game? Like, nobody cares. Like, they could care less. And it's like sometimes you get in the United States where people, you can talk to them and they don't know about UFOs. In Canada, that's way worse. I mean, people really don't care at all. It's not a major issue here.
If you wanted to get access to what the Canadian military has, not only investigated, but different occurrences or different events. How would you go about it?
Well, that's the thing. You'd have to get them, and I filed with them. When the To the Stars came forward, I went to them and I requested their documents, and they sent back. Oh no, it was the CBC went to them. The CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting, which is the government radio TV station, went to them and asked them, "What about UFOs?" And they sent back this thing that had a Billy Meyer photograph. And it said on there, we only investigate things. This is not a threat to national security, and we only investigate things that are serious or something like that. They just totally distanced the whole thing. So then I went after them with my FOA, and I said, "Well, did you pay for rights to Billy Meyer's photograph?" And we tried to get into that thing, but they just say it's not a threat to national security, and I think they actually believe it's not a threat to national security. We don't need to worry about this. We're sort of more worried about what Putin is doing and stuff like that. And we do our NATO thing, and we used to be peacekeepers. Now we're more we just do whatever the Americans do. So we buy, like, for example, I used to say, like, why are we buying F-35 jet fighters? They're strike fighters. Like, what the hell are we buying strike fighters for? That's an offensive weapon, and the Canadians have never been known for offensive stuff. We're always like the peacekeepers, and we'll get in at the end. But it's sort of changed now. We're just sort of an arm of the U.S. military, I think, in terms of what we do. And that same thing happens, I think, with the UFOs. I have one case, and that's from a NORAD officer who I interviewed, and he's now dead. He's been dead about 2 years. But this is a 1959 case out of Comox, the Air Force base on the west coast of Canada. And he was the officer on duty when he came in. And the guy before him said, "There's a UFO at 2 miles off the end of the runway." And he said, "Well, what'd you do?" He said, "I didn't do anything. I was waiting for you to come in." And so he looks, and then he scrambles the jets, and they move off onto the Pacific Ocean. And then they target them in again, and they go there. And then he said this whole deal where they went like 50 miles in a couple of seconds. And this was 1959. That's the only case I've got where this guy's describing how the government came to him, or his superior at the NORAD. NORAD really didn't get involved, but the Air Force came in and they said, Stan, the Air Force, the media is asking us, and we both know that nothing really happened last night. Do you understand? And he said, "Yes, sir, I understand." So he knew, you're not going to talk about it. And it just faded away. And then years later, we found out that he'd had this. And he's basically sat down on camera and told us his whole story. That's the only case I've got. We really don't have the thing with the Nimitz and stuff, which makes you sort of wonder whether that's part of the UFO thing, where the UFOs are interested in the U.S. military, where they're playing these games with like even Lou Elizondo talked about the Nimitz, that there was more nuclear firepower on the Nimitz Nimitz carrier group with all the ships and the submarines and stuff than there was in the state of New York. And you hear that kind of stuff, and you realize that maybe that's what they're doing, is the intelligence is playing games with the U.S. military. And so you have these cases of, orbs coming really close to planes, and these UFOs sitting there for a week waiting for the Nimitz to track them, and that they're playing these games. Whereas the Canadian military, I think it's just an arm of the U.S. military, and there's absolutely nothing that comes out. I've never heard anything, and I'm pretty tapped in. I got the Canadian the files from the Canadian Department of Transport my father used to work for. I filed, and after about 3 pages, I stopped reading. It was just these things like so and so reported an object, and then it goes to the next sighting, and it was like there's 3 lights, and they looked at the 3 lights, next object, and it was that kind of thing for 160 pages. So they'll release that kind of stuff, but there's really nothing in there that's of military significance. Well, we had an engagement. We sometimes they'll scramble jets, and they'll the one report they scrambled jets and it was a balloon or something like that. So it's when you get these reports, they'll sort of give you the reports, but there's basically nothing that you could go on. And that's what Lou and Chris wanted us to do, was to get this military aspect where we're under threat at the Canadian airspace. And we just said we don't have any military cases. We can't go that route. There's nobody to talk to, and then you got to talk to them, and then you got to get them to out themselves, like the guys on the Nimitz did. It took them years to out themselves. And I said we just don't have anything. And it sort of surprised me when people say to me, well, they say, well, what's going on in Canada? And I said, I worked on this for like 50 years, and I haven't got a clue. I know what happened in the early 1950s, but right now I have no clue Because
what about Shag Harbor?
well, that was big at the time, but you got to remember, I mean, how many investigators do we have? We have the Shag Harbor, we have Chris Rakowski, we have myself. There's really not that many cases or investigators. We have the big one here in Manitoba, which was the Falcon Lake case, where the guy touched the thing, the door opened up and he got burned. And we were actually on the site last year, and I actually grabbed some rocks, which I show off to people from the actual the surface of this, where this UFO was standing. And I said, here's a piece of the rock. I'll give it to people for like a souvenir. I say, hey, here's a piece of the rock. The UFO may have actually, the foot may have actually been right on that rock that you're doing, because all the shale was breaking off the top of this rock where this thing was sitting. And I picked up all these pieces. So that was a big case in 1967. Then the guy died. There was a book published. But the Canadians just don't see it. It seems to die. Well, all the UFO stories sort of die off. It's the story's big. It's you know how Facebook works. You put it on Facebook and you get like a pile of hits in the first hour and then half that in the second hour. And by the third hour, everybody's on their Facebook. They're just going through Facebook. They got a 17-second attention span. They're on to the next story. It's 24/7 news. No story hangs on long enough for you to actually investigate it, because everybody's always looking for the next story. And that's the serious problem I think we have in the UFO community, is that everybody's always thinks that the next story is the one that's going to break it. And that's why we get caught in so many hoaxes, because somebody will say, oh, breaking news, we got this video, and everybody jumps on the video. And then after 1 hour or a day, someone says, oh, that was a hoax. And everybody goes, okay. And we're off, and we're waiting for the next story to break. And we're so easy to set up, because everybody thinks it's the next story, rather than taking the pieces we've got, talking to the people we've got, taking the evidence we got, and figuring what's going on from what we've got. We always think it's going to be something down the road. Something's going to break. There's going to be a crash. We're going to get it. And that's why we fall for so many hoaxes, I think.
And going back to Shag Harbor for just a second, it kind of reflects somewhat with the points that you were just making, that there was a United States Air Force presence almost immediately. And there were reports about the United States being brought in, and that whole thing, that investigation may have gone from, the Mounties, right, and handed over to the United States. And there was a lot of reports to that effect, weren't there? Yeah.
And you had the object, but there was no object ever recovered. And they play the game. Well, all the governments play the same game, is you just wait them out, and eventually everybody will sort of forget about it and go on to another story. Like you even have I hit the political example, but you have the January 6th thing. So they say, oh, the president, what was the files for the president? Oh, there's 6 hours missing on January the 6th. Oh, the Secret Service files are missing. Oh, the files from the heads of the Defense Department are missing. And then it goes, and it's a big story, and everybody talks about it for 2 days. I mean, who's talked about that story recently? It's sort of like you just realize that you can do this. You do what you do, keep your mouth shut, and eventually people will go on to another story. And that's what happens. That's what happened to Shag Harbor. That's what happened to any of the big cases in Canada. They were sort of big for a little while, but you need to put a lot of pressure as a researcher on a case to keep the thing active. Otherwise it just fades away and everybody goes on to something else. And in Canada, it's really bad because everybody's on to hockey and the weather and stuff like that. And I would say even the UFO issue, even in, and bring this up in terms of disclosure, Eric Walker, we dealt with this Eric Walker guy, who was the president of Penn State University. He was on the Defense Science Board. He was one of the guys that started DARPA, the Jasons. He was on the Institute for Defense Analysis, the biggest military think tank. He was president of Penn State University, had 14 honorary doctorate degrees. Kate Green went to see him, and we were asking him, like, well, you're an old man, release it. And then he said, why? He said, admit it. Why do you want it? It's just curiosity, right? You're just curious. You want to know, right? Admit it. And then he said, why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? And then Bush was told, you remember this story? Bush supposedly told Jimmy Carter, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. Just because you're curious doesn't mean we're going to give up the UFO files and the classified files and stuff like that. And so they just play this game where they wait people out. They'll play these little games of making stuff, hard to get at. And eventually people will just sort of walk away and go on to the next story. And I think that's the way the cover-up has sort of been enabled and allowed to work for so many years successfully is that you need a lot of people, a lot of energy to keep a story going, to get the pressure on the government.
We have gotten so, I'm the United States for sure, but the rest of the world is we've gotten so acclimated to this 60-second news cycle.
Yeah.
It's not 24 hours. You remember when they used to call, you remember that 24-hour news cycle? Now it's just seconds. If we went through, and I don't want to kick a dead horse here, I've done it so much on Fade to Black over the years, trying to get people aware to this. Is that if we went over the last 7 days, just the last 7 days, Grant, from you and I talking right now, the last 7 days, those would have been the biggest headlines of the century.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, right. But now that the news cycle, the way that it lays down, it is so big and so utterly unbelievable the next day. And then it forces you to have amnesia. You don't remember the news from 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I challenge people all the time. Do you realize what just happened 2 days ago?
Yeah.
And oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. And this is where the UFO part of all of this and contact and ETs it gets lost in the mix. And you can bury anything that you want to get buried today. It's easy to do.
Especially with an issue, because I say that I haven't seen that. I've always tried to find the poll, but I would guarantee you that UFOs, if you ask people on the street, what's your top 100 issues? I bet you UFOs wouldn't be in it. People, it's just not on their mind. It's not a bread and butter issue. If it was like the economy or losing jobs or the price of your house, then people would get into it. But it's what Walker said. Why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? Or Kit Green went in to see him. If you know the story, Kit Green, it was told Jacques Vallée. They told me the story when it happened because it was basically Bill Moore who sent him in there for me. They said, "Oh, I don't believe Walker's as powerful as you say, but I'm sending BJ in there, who's the Blue Jay was Kit Green." And Kit Green goes in there, and they both worked on the Glomar Explorer, CIA. So they're talking about Glomar Explorer, and it was all going great. And then Kit Green says, "I've got a clearance to talk to you about UFOs, and I'd like to know, the whole deal with UFOs." And Walker, as according to Kit Green, says Walker said to him, "Give me 2 reasons why I should tell you what's going on." And then Kit Green, he says, apparently I didn't give him the right reasons because he basically threw him out of the office. And it was this kind of thing where they'll stand their ground and they'll say, the people don't have a right to know this. This is national security. I was even just listening to an interview by Jim Semivan. He said, there's absolutely no way they're going to release anything significant to you because this has turned into a national security issue. It could be a threat to national security, and it's being run by the military now. So they're going to tell you how many sightings there was. But basically, other than that, they're not going to tell you anything because they're going to make it as a thing where we don't want to give it to some crazy guy in Iran who's got a PhD and he's going to develop a weapon which is going to kill us if we put that out. There's a bunch of crazy people. It's a scary world. That's what Semivan says. It's a real scary world. You got to realize this, that we're up against these people and we are not going to give them our secrets. And so he said clearly that you are not going to learn what's going on here in terms of they're not going to set up an investigation on the philosophical implications of UFOs. They don't care. They're only interested in the national security aspect of this story. And that's what they're going to work on. That's what the money's going to be spent on. And they are going to give it to the public because it's national security. I even made a joke where, we complained about the Blue Book. So he said, Blue Book, it was terrible. I mean, it was such a scam. And how could they? And now we got something real. And what are they doing now? You say to them, okay, what have you got? And they say, we've got 144 cases. One we've identified. And then you say, can you tell us the shapes? Can't tell the shapes. That's classified. Can you see the reports? Nope. The reports are classified. So in Blue Book, we had the reports and we had the shapes of the object. We don't even have that anymore. We just got how many cases there was and how many they identified. And that people don't have to realize that this is they're waiting for sort of the Messiah to come and give them all the answers and stuff like that. And as according to Jim Semivan, who I think is the most respected guy that I listen to, Jim Semivan said, ain't going to happen. And he said, I'd like it to happen, but you got to realize the mentality of these people who are now controlling the narrative here.
Why the delay of the expected UFO report? Why this delay? It was due, mandated October 31st, Halloween, Monday. And we are now closing in halfway through December, and Christmas is coming up. Why the delay?
Okay, this is just my take. Is the game that they realized there was the election, so the election sort of went both ways. So there's a sort of a deadlock. You've got a sort of a dead government. It's like a lame duck government because the one party's blocking this and the other party. It's this idea where it's 50-50, and so you have people inside who are fighting this. They do not want this out. And it's the same idea of the Secret Service records. They say, challenge us. We're going to delay it. Right? And you delay the thing and you say they're not going to do anything. And that's what I would agree. Chris Mellon has actually said he sees no stuff scheduled for the near future in terms of hearings and these kind of things for witnesses. And that's the thing. You have the people that are trying to block it realize that there's this blockade in government, that you can't get enough support. Nobody's going to be able to push this thing through. And everybody's going to be interested in investigating all sorts of other things. They're not really interested in investigating UFOs. And so you're playing this game, and it indicates that the powers that be are saying, challenge us, make us release this report. And if it was going along great and everybody was hunky-dory on the report, it would have come out on time. This indicates that there's powers there that are delaying this report and are saying, we're just not going to play the game. Force us to play the game. And I think with the government for the next 2 years in the United States, I don't see really much happening at all because the government is sort of deadlocked on anything. You can't get the government to decide what bathroom to go to. It's total deadlock now in terms of the one running the House, one running the Senate, one in the White House. That is very hard to get anything done. You need all these people to agree, and nobody's agreeing on anything.
Do you think that it may happen though before the first of the year? The new Congress is going to come in on the 15th of January, the new House, and that certainly points back to what you're referring to right now. So, would it be better to get the report out now? I'm talking about for the ODNI. Or to back off on this until the new Congress comes in, which would make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I think it's going to be weaker once the new Congress comes in. I actually challenged Schiff, head of the intelligence for the Senate or for the House, and I said to him, in 43 days, they are going to kick you out. They've already said we're pulling them off all the committees. We're going to pay him back for doing the January 6th thing. And I said, you're dead in the water, man. Why don't you want to know what UFOs are? You say you're serious? Drop it in their lap right before you go and say, here's something you can investigate. You want to investigate Biden's files? You want to investigate this? Here, investigate this, and drop it at the last second. I don't think Schiff's going to do it. If I was Schiff and I knew that they were going to hang me and I'm not going to do anything except stand there and twiddle my thumbs for the next 2 years, I would drop it in their lap and say, you want to investigate? Here. Hand it to them where they have to deal with it right at the last minute. I don't think, and I challenged Schiff on Twitter. I was pushing it and making jokes every day on his Twitter and stuff like that. I don't think he's going to do it. I don't know why they wouldn't do it. To me, they once the new House comes in, it's really dead in the water. But it's up to the Democrats, if they're seriously interested in doing this thing, that they can drop this thing. They can give it to the House. And they've got to deal with it.
That's the question that I have, where we are closing in on. There's a lot of action that has to happen before New Year's Eve, before December 31st. And one of those things, for me that is important is this UFO report. But I don't know the vibe of Capitol Hill right now, where it seemed last year and the year before that, there was a lot of action, a lot of talk, and now it just seems to be, the subject is getting ghosted.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to what are you going to get when you get the report? Because the rumors was like 350 reports, and half of them had been identified or something, or half of them were unknowns. And it's going to be the same thing. You got 350 reports, and half are unknowns. That's it. That's your report, and everybody's going to go, look, well, where's the stuff? And it's like, again, it's national security. Anything outside the numbers is going to be national security. It's going to be, well, we don't want to tell you where the bases are or what we've discovered or what we think or whatever. This is all going to be national security. And that's the sad part, is that it's easier to make stuff classified and then force people to force it out into the open. That if you're in a national security state, I call it the national insecurity state. It basically, you're looking for an enemy. It's like, the footprints in the living room. Oh, these UFOs could be a threat. There's footprints in your living room, and this sort of thing, where you're always looking for an enemy. And if you're always looking for an enemy, you're going to play the thing. You're going to play it safe. You're not going to put it out there, because you're going to figure that the Russians are going to pick it up, or the Chinese are going to pick it up. And it's always going to be, as I said, when I was doing the investigation back in the 1990s, that your highest level security stuff, the top secret coded stuff, is all weapons. And this is weapons. This is trying to figure out, how does this propulsion system work? How can we use it? How can you put bulls inside trailers? All this weird paranormal stuff, because we want to get this. If the Russians get this stuff, if they're able to do telekinesis and move stuff around, and I've got a book called Ports and Manifestations coming out called Weird. And I even quote a 1974, this is 74 document from the DIA talking about apports, where things were in the paranormal phenomena, where stuff moves around in a house, and experiencers experience this all the time, where stuff's moving around, disappears, and then reappears two weeks later and stuff like that. And Hal Puthoff actually had it in his lab in the 1970s, where this stuff was falling out of the ceiling and stuff like that. The 1974 DIA said, if we can develop this technology, we can go into the enemy's files, grab the files, bring them to America, photocopy them, and send them back, and they don't even know we were there. And that's this whole thing. Can you go and can you grab the stuff out of the Russian files and bring them back and then put them back? This paranormal stuff has a lot of implications of weapons, and the highest classification of weapons is that's the highest classification. And you even have the idea of what was called lead time. So the whole idea is you want to be lead time ahead of the Russians and the Chinese. It's like the dropping of the atomic bomb. You drop the atomic bomb, and then the emperor says, okay, well, let's drop an atomic bomb on them. How long is it going to take to build? Oh, yeah, 7 or 8 years. And they go, well, it's too late. It's the idea. You can be one day ahead of your enemy in terms of the secret weapon, and you can win the war, because they can't fight back. They haven't got the weapon. And that's what it's about. It's about this lead time, is staying ahead of the Russians, staying way ahead of them, so that they don't develop because that's the whole thing. DARPA. That's why DARPA was built, is because the Americans got caught with Sputnik. They got embarrassed that Sputnik went up before them, and they said, this will never happen again. DARPA will ensure that we are on the leading edge of all technology. So if they're going to be on the leading edge of the UFO technology, they are not going to take any chances. They're going to keep it highly classified, and they're going to work it so they have this lead time thing. And that's what national security is all about, is this idea that there are all these enemies out there, and we're going to make sure, and the idea of the UFOs may be enemies, and we don't know for sure. So we're not going to tell people what we know. And I just don't see anything coming out beyond the numbers. I mean, there may be, Lou can force out something, or it's coming out through leaks through Lou and Chris as to what they've got, but you've heard about it. Well, they've got these 20 videos. They got this 20-minute video where the thing morphs. I've even talked to a guy who saw the video, and you have all these things that got all this stuff, and it hasn't come out. Well, why hasn't it come out? You just hear the rumors of this stuff, so they have it, and they're trying to get it out. They can't get this stuff out.
Well, it goes back to the point that we were talking about at the start of the show, which is this. It's not just an American thing. And if we have a craft at Lockheed Skunk Works that we're backwards engineering, which seems to be the case, well, Russia's got to have one too. I mean, what? We're the only ones to possess something like this. What about China? And China's technical skills have accelerated beyond. They have their own space station right now. They've got 6 dudes on that space station right now. 6. We have 7 on the ISS. But that's where China is. Hypersonic missiles and the technology and the abilities of both the Chinese and the Russians are right there on par with us. Is it a stretch to suggest that Russia or China or both have a craft of their own that they're backwards engineering? I would say not.
That's what Bigelow said. Bigelow said he believes that China has one, Russia has one, South America. He even said that he believes they're being seeded, which is the same thing that Tim Taylor said, believed the gifting field idea. That's what I asked Jacques Vallée. And Jacques Vallée says, well, I think I come up with the idea. And so they all believe this idea that it's actually being dropped. But what you got to realize is, what is the potential? Like Jim Semivan says, and that's what my opinion right now is, they really don't know anything. They is like at the end of the Wilson leak document, it says, we have a craft and we think it will fly.
We think it'll fly. Yep.
And what does that mean? It means they have a craft and they can't fly it, because they can't turn it on. You need consciousness to turn it on. So you have this consciousness interface thing that they can't figure out. And then that's what Eric Davis says. They took it and put it on the shelf in 1989. They couldn't figure it out. That's the core story thing. We can't figure this thing out. And then you have the thing which I'm working on now, because I did the whole thing about the sky pilot thing, the people who claim to have flown the craft, and it's done with the mind. I've got 35.
Let's talk about the book. Let's it's a good flow. It's a good segue. The book is called UFO Sky Pilots. And I remember reading the synopsis, the idea behind the book, that you went and interviewed how many people?
I have 36 plus people in the book.
36 people that say that they have been on board and flown these craft, correct?
Yeah. Which was a totally bizarre thing. When I first heard it, I said, this is absolutely insane. Like, are you crazy? I was going to throw the woman out of the house when she first told me. I said, this is bizarre. If you're going to make up a UFO story, why would it? And that's what the bizarre, it's almost like Hal Puthoff says, the UFO phenomena is absurd. That's exactly what it is. It's absurd. Like, it doesn't make any sense that if you're going to make up a story, you're going to say, oh, I flew the craft. Yeah, sure you did. This is a woman who was like in her 70s. So I've flown 3 different models. I'm going, come on. Like, I couldn't believe it. And then suddenly all these other people started coming to me, and I started to realize that this may actually be true. And it was just the most bizarre thing. But you look at that technology, but you look at the other technology that some of the sky pilots talk about, is they go inside the craft and Lovecraft, what's his name? Chris Bledsoe had that, where the craft is bigger on the inside than it is outside. And there's a 1973 Stringfield report, which I just discovered, 1973 Stringfield report that talks about the fact that a photographer is flown out of Hawaii into Norton Air Force Base. He's moved in a car for 2 hours, and he comes to this hangar. And inside the hangar, there's a big crane. And on the end of the crane, there's this netting, which is holding a saucer that's 30 feet across. And this guy's job is to go in and film the panels. So in the book, I actually show the panel. Chris Bledsoe showed the panel he drew the panel with all these symbols on it. And his job was to photograph all these panels with the symbols on them. And he said when he walked in, he said he could have taken a football, and in any direction, he could have thrown it as hard as he could and not hit a wall. And the other thing, it was 30 feet on the outside, and it was huge on the inside. And then I'd say maybe 7 or 8 experiencers described that to me. One guy just said, I looked to the left, I could not see the end of the craft. I looked to the right, I could not see the end of the craft. Well, if this technology on the ground, it's doing this, where they've got it captured, where you have, Hal Puthoff even said that. I would like to know, he said, I'd like to know, how can the craft be bigger on the inside than the outside, which sort of confirms that, yeah, this is true. So if you have this, it indicates that this is so far beyond what we have, and they're trying to figure this thing out. That people have to realize that, when you get crafts that you fly with your mind, or people will tell the story, they're in the craft and the being says, oh, I'll show you something, a book, and the wall is there, and he goes like this by the wall, and the book comes out of the wall, and he opens this book, that this kind of technology where they can make the craft as big as they want. The first woman that told me that she was flying the craft actually told me, she says they can make the craft as big as they want. Others of these 36 people have described the same thing. They can make the craft as big as they want on the inside. She said they have craft that are as big as the solar system. I went, yeah, right there. But then when this other stuff started to be confirmed, I'm thinking, maybe this is true, because these people are describing the craft can be as big as they want. So you can actually have like a rock sitting on the side of the road, and inside there's a whole civilization that you see it as a craft that's 30 feet across. And inside, even Lovkin, or whatever his name is, said when he went inside, it was the size of a football stadium inside. And
you're talking about Terry Lovelace.
Yeah, Terry Lovelace. So that's the thing, is you get this bizarre technology, or people will go in there and they'll describe stuff that you see in out-of-body experience, in other paranormal phenomena. They'll go in, the one guy from Liverpool, because what do they all do? It's all the same story. You go into the craft, Lots of times there's a being or there's military people. They can't tell whether it's alien intelligence or human intelligence behind, but somebody's behind them. And they go into craft. I have a guy out of LA who's part of the Orange County group. His name is Robert. He's former U.S. Air Force colonel, retired, flew F-16s and stuff. He told me he goes into craft. He's standing there and these beings are behind him. And they say, go ahead and do it. And he says, I don't know what to do. And they say, you know what to do. Just do it. And he sees this panel on the wall. He goes and puts his hand on the panel. Everyone described the same thing. You put your hand on the panel and you suddenly realize this craft is alive, which means this is artificial intelligence. This is what artificial intelligence is going to look like 500 years or 1,000 years from now. It's biological. That's the mistake we're making. We're thinking you put enough computer stuff into a machine and it will work. No, you need biological material to think, to develop. And that's what they've got. The craft is alive. It's conscious. You can talk to the craft. And whatever you do, you become one with the craft. And everybody describes the same thing. You suddenly become one with the craft. Whatever you think is what the craft does. And then they tell you, so this guy puts his hand on the panel, this U.S. Air Force colonel guy puts his hand on the panel. And suddenly he says, I'm flying. It's like flying an F-16 fighter. He says, I couldn't believe it. I'm flying this thing. And then he says, I take my one hand off the panel and I'm ready to put it back down because I figure it's going to stall. And he says, I take my hand off the panel and I'm still flying the craft. And then I take my other hand off the panel, but only 1 inch. And he's ready to put it back down. Takes his hand off and he's still flying the craft. And he's got his hands off. And they all say the same thing. You only have to put your hand on the panel. You take your hand off the panel and then they'll tell you, go within yourself. It's inside you. Think where you want to go. And this is what Stephen Greer uses in his initiation when he does the meditation before. He has the Sufi expression. You think yourself a puny form when within you, the universe is unfolded. And if that's true, if it's all within you, they say, go within yourself. Think where you want to go. And everybody, whether it's John Ramirez, whether it's Chris Bledsoe, will say you instantly go, almost like the remote viewing where you say, here's the target number, 76734. And person says, I'm at the target. There's no, I'm flying to the target. I'll be there. You're at the target instantaneously. You just think where you want to go. And people will say, the one guy told me, Ron Johnson, who's a Mormon guy, very strict Mormon guy out of Utah. He's had experiences his whole life. Now he's written a book about all these experiences he had about his life with this being by the name of LB. And he says, they sits in the chair. He says, where do you want to go? He says, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. And they say, okay, it's within you. Think about where you want to go. And he said, in 1 second, he said, it was like going through the pages of a book. It was like going through the dimensions. And he said, he looked out the window. 1 second later, he said, there was the Milky Way off in the distance, which indicates that that's 50 to 70,000 light years in 1 second. If that's true, there's something seriously wrong with our idea about time and space. And they understand how it works. And people will talk about, Ramirez talks about, he doesn't even use a craft, where people will talk about this thing where they can go to a thing instantaneously, not even 1 second. And that's the kind of stuff, when you see that technology, you realize what we may be up against, what the military is up against, where they say, as Eric Davis said, they put it on the shelf in 1989. They just couldn't figure it out. Hal Puthoff said the same thing. Valet said the same thing, that they've got hardware, but they can't figure it out. Or you'll hear stories that Melinda Leslie and people will tell, the Millard people, where they get abducted and they come in and the person gives them a piece of equipment and they're able to operate it. And they say, okay, we got another one. And they know this person's an experiencer because they can make these pieces of the craft operate. And that's the whole thing. It's this touching of the craft, becoming one with the craft. And then you get situations where experiencers will say, I know they're here. I know they're here. And person will say, well, how do you know? And that's because they vibrated with the craft. So when the craft is in the area, they can feel the vibration. It's here. It's here. They can't see it yet. Like that's just with Chris Bledsoe and John Alexander, where they're standing there. Chris Bledsoe said to John Alexander, they're here. And John says, how do you know? I just know they're here. And John says, boom, this thing appears above them and goes flying off. And John said it was one of the most impressive things he'd ever seen in his life. But that's the whole idea. Once you've vibrated with the craft, it's this touching, the oneness of the craft. The craft is alive. It's artificial intelligence. Even Kathy Martin's assistant, whose name will escape me, she even said she was talking to the craft. And she said, I felt sorry for it. And it was communicating with all different crafts all around the universe. And she said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're locked up in this craft. And he said, that is my job. Do not worry about me. I'm doing what I want to do. And she's talking to the craft, and other people gave the craft names. But you see this. And the thing is, Gary Nolan says 1 case is anecdotal, 2 is evidence. 36 cases, we better start investigating. I even talked to the Free Foundation, because in the Free Foundation, when they did the experiences for 3,000 experiences, they did the poll, they asked the question, and the people that answered the question, how many people have flown the craft? 14% of the people said they'd flown the craft. I went to Free. I said, we should send out a survey to these 14% of people, and let's analyze these people and ask them what they're saying or how it works and stuff like that for propulsion. And I was told, oh, well, there's all sorts of stuff happening inside the craft. They see all sorts of stuff. I said, yeah, they may see stuff, but when they start talking about flying the craft, don't you think we should be talking to these people? There's a lot of people are claiming this.
Well, okay. So it seems that it's an easy enough thing to figure out in that it's a consciousness-driven vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And for Lockheed, if you go to the Wilson Davis document, where these 3 members of this aerospace corporation, we can assume that it was Lockheed. I feel confident in saying that. That they have a craft they think it can fly. Well, aren't the engineers at Lockheed smart enough to know that it's a consciousness driven vehicle and you have to put your hands down and get connected to it? Why can't they figure that part out? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, but you're not the right person. It's like your fingerprint on your cell phone. It has to be the right person. It has to be as experienced. That's why they put these pieces of equipment in the person's hand. And if they can operate it, then, okay, this is an experiencer. And they say they're trying to figure out, why did the aliens pick you? Why have they got you? Why are they training you to fly the craft? Why are they teaching you to levitate stuff and stuff like that? And I think it may even have been on your show. It was either you or George Knapp when you first interviewed Tom DeLonge. He talks about being in the skiff. And there's the 2 guys, and Robert Weiss still hasn't come in the room yet. And they're asking about this conspiracy website that he had, this crazy conspiracy website. And he's trying to justify this. And then the head scientist, the head scientist asks him, he says, so I just want to know, how does it work? How do they get here? And he had been hanging around with Greer at the time before he broke off with Greer. He was hanging around with Greer. And then he said, I think consciousness is involved. And he said, the scientist said, now the head scientist for Lockheed Skunk Works said to him, now you're talking. And Tom DeLonge said that's all he wanted to talk about for 45 minutes was consciousness. So they know the consciousness connection. But the thing is, if you can bring somebody in with a piece of the equipment for the craft, they can't get it to work. You need an experiencer. You need someone who's actually been locked in by, it's almost like you get trained by the beings to do this, and not everybody can turn the craft on. So they understand this consciousness connection. But it's the whole idea that they've had this craft. Even Eric Davis said, this whole idea, and I've heard this for years, that they had a craft, that it was intact. And Eric Davis uses the word, that's where he was putting down Bob Lazar. He says, Lazar's full of it. He said that they shelved it in 1989, and the hardware is not even at Area 51. And I'm going, holy cow, that's a pretty big lead. And seems like he knows what's going on with the thing. But you listening to some of the people like Semivan and all these people, they basically say, we haven't got a clue. This is way beyond us. And that's the core story. That was when Jacques Vallée, Hal Puthoff, and Kit Green got together in the Denny's restaurant, and they said, there's all this garbage in the UFO community. We don't know what to believe. And they said, let's come up with the core story. What's the core story? What do we know for sure? And what they knew for sure was we are being engaged by some sort of intelligence. We have hardware and we can't back engineer it. We're having very bad success at back engineering the hardware. So that's the whole thing. It has this consciousness interface. It's this bizarre thing where it's way bigger on the inside than it is outside. And people will describe the same with the out-of-body experience. And then you start wondering, is this out-of-body experience or is this abduction experience? Where the person will put his hand on the panel and he says, I could see in 360 degrees. I actually went back to Ron Johnson to clarify this. I said, could you see 360 degrees in one direction? He said, no, 360 degrees up and down, 360 degrees around me. And everybody would say the same thing. I could see in 360 degrees. Well, if you talk to people who have out-of-body experiences, that's what they'll say. I can see in 360 degrees. I had never heard that until these 36 people started coming to me. I'd never heard that. I said, that's really weird. That was like, why would you make up that story? I can see in 360 degrees. Who's going to believe you? Who's going to believe you're flying the craft? And that's the important part, is these things are so absurd. And it's almost like it was given, because you don't find this stuff on the internet. Most of these people came to me. It was like synchronicity, where I was talking to Chris Bledsoe, and then he said, I was flying the craft. I said, you were flying the craft too? Hang on, I want to interview you. And it was these people would accidentally, synchronistically come to me with these stories about flying the craft. And there are none on the internet. There's really none. They're all of the ones that are around are in my book.
The before we take a break here, the ability to I'm going to use the word navigate. Let's go with navigate. The ability to do that once you take out hardware out of the mix, or fly-by-wire out of the mix, or any kind of the sticks or steering wheel, you take all of that out, plus the direction and the location, right? You take all of that out and you put it up here. That would indicate to me that the process now is very simple, right? You're not stepping. This isn't Star Wars, right? You're not jumping out and flipping all these switches and going through a checklist and what pilots do. Watching a pilot today go through his checklist with his cell phone, by the way, it's a pretty disturbing thing to see. But anyway,
and the key to this, Jimmy, is that this was done 20 years ago. The movie Firefox. Remember the movie Firefox?
I do.
That's exactly what, and so like the idea is like, did they know? This is the whole premise where he flies it with his mind. He's flying this MiG fighter out of Russia with his mind. It's got this. So who put that into the movie? When I saw that, I go, oh, they already knew. They had this. They stuck it in the movie.
Right. And so my point being, it's easy for ET to do what they're doing. We're thinking about all these, faster than light, and how is this possible? And it sounds like it's a pretty simple process, and that's why ET does it, because it's easy. It's not because it's difficult.
Yeah, it's instantaneous. I'll tell you a related story. I had this meeting with Tim Taylor. This is before he went secret and all this kind of stuff. The guy from American Cosmic. I was in a cottage with him in Pennsylvania, and a bunch of other people, Chris Bledsoe, and people were there. And he came up and he showed me these photographs. And he said, "What do you think of these? What do you think of these paintings?" And the one was these two guys, and they were like flying through space. And one had like pajamas on. One guy was old, one guy was young. And then the next one was these sort of an eclipse. These three pictures of an eclipse. And then there was one with all these balls, big balls going into little balls. He said, "What do you think of this?" I go, "I don't know, Tim. I have no idea." And then he shows me on top of the 57 or 58 Chev or something on top. He said, "There's a postcard in the back," and it's this guy with his girlfriend. He says, "Oh, I wish I could travel through time to be with you." And I said, "That's what the postcard said?" And he said, "Yeah, that's what the postcard said." And then he said, "Well," he said, "You know where that is?" I said, "No, I have no idea where it is. I have no idea what he's talking about." It's like he's showing me these stupid paintings. And he says, you know where that is?" I said, "No." He said, "That's a Hughes aircraft building." I said, "I still don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about, Tim." He said, "That's where the jump room was." And I went, "That's where the jump room was?" I said, and he said, "The one with the two guys flying is outside the elevator." And I go, "Wow." And then I go to Lockheed. It's still there outside of LAX. You can go there. Now it's an office building. You can go and you can take photographs of these paintings that Tim showed me. And I went up and there was no car on the parkade or whatever. And I took it. And then about 2 years later, I'm thinking to myself, I'm going, why did he show me those photographs? Why was Tim Taylor at Lockheed? There must be some truth to the story. And that's that idea of the jump room. It may be a twisted story, but it's the idea that you don't fly like faster than the speed of light and you put all sorts of luggage in there and stuff. You go from here to there just instantaneously. And it's the idea that it's the old idea. If time and space are illusions, if they are not what they are, how big is the universe? It could be the idea that the universe, it's like the out-of-body experience. You leave your body and you look back at your brain and you say, consciousness is in the brain. I'm conscious. My brain is right there. I can see my brain and the consciousness is here. My body is in my consciousness. I look out the window in my out-of-body experience. The stars are in my consciousness. And that's this, I think what the flip is going to be is this consciousness thing where it may be all one thing. It may be, even when we asked Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, they said to him, Jan Hartson asked him, "How did they get here? How does it work?" And he said, "What do you know about ESP?" And Jan Hartson says, "Oh, it means everything in time and space is connected." He said, "That's how it works." That's what Eric Walker said to us. Let me ask you, what do you know about ESP? And we said, well, we didn't really know. And he said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand how it works. And it's the whole idea ESP with remote viewing. You're instantly at the target. You don't travel to the target. You can be instantly anywhere you want. And that's the you see how far that technology is advanced. And that's where you get Jim Semivan saying there does not appear to be any there. Almost like the idea is that we've got this thing all figured out. is total nonsense, that this is so far removed, so thing. And that's why I think the Sky Pilot book is so important. It's 36 people who are telling this bizarre story about what artificial intelligence in the future may look like, and the fact that we can go from here to there instantaneously, and that it's this a totally different world, and the problem is a lot more difficult than people think it is.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, the one and only Grant Cameron. We've got a lot to discuss tonight, and we are going to get to all of it. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Check out Billy Carson's Forbidden Knowledge. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv, where you can get access to over 6,000 videos, movies, TV series, exclusive documentaries like the Black Knight Satellite. You can do it all for just $7.77 per month or $77 per year after the 3-day trial, which is also totally free to check out. It's all simple to do. Billy Carson is the best. It's simple. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's the number 4BK. I will be hosting and emceeing the Conscious Life Expo this February 10th through the 13th at the LAX Hilton right here in Los Angeles, California. 200 speakers, including Linda Moulton Howe, Bashar, Deborah King, George Norrie, Daniel Sheehan, Scott Walter Johnstone, and David Wolf. Over 200 vendors, special events. This is the biggest event of its kind on planet Earth. You've got to come and hang out with all of us. Tickets and info at ConsciousLifeExpo.com. The links are below. On Saturday, April 1st, that's right, April Fool's Day, 2023, I will be hosting the Parapod Festival at the Hyatt Regency right here in Valencia, California. It's a live one-day podcast awards. It's a film festival. It's a full-on media event. We're going to have sky watching. There's going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Linda Moulton Howe. Right now, you can submit your podcast, your film, your TV series, any of your paranormal media for consideration. You can do all of that on the links below. For info and tickets, go to parapodfilmfest.com. That's parapodfilmfest.com. April 7th through the 14th, 2023, I'll be hosting and presenting on the Hidden Secrets Seminar at Sea Cruise. From Los Angeles to the Mexican Riviera on the Navigator of the Seas. That's right, up top, a giant water slide. You've got to check out the Navigator of the Seas. It's amazing. We've got Scott Walter, Adam Apollo, Nick Pope, Brad Olson, Vivian Chauvet, Jason Shurka, Robert Grant, Ruben Langdon, and another 12 amazing speakers and presenters. It's all simple to do. Just visit divinetravels.com/Hidden Secrets 2023. You know you want to go on a cruise with me. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Grant Cameron is with us. And I'm waiting for Grant to come back in and get settled in. Oh, here he comes. He's back with us. Grant, watching your social media is interesting and fun and funny. You're a funny guy, and lately, all serious in everything I'm about to say, you posted a lot of orbs and different ideas behind what these may be. We've talked about Chris Bledsoe a few times tonight. Yeah. Ultimately, as we start to get into this subject, what do you think is going on? Is this a spiritual thing, Is this an ET thing? What do you make of it?
Okay, part of well, I guess there's two different aspects. Part of what I think is going on, I call it the theory of wow, where they've come in and they as John Alexander says, this phenomenon morphs. They found that at Skinwalker Ranch. It was never the same thing every 2 days in a row. You'd learn something and then they would change it. They'd do something else. And what you see is this morphing of they started in 1890s when we discovered the canals on Mars. We think, oh, Mars may be inhabited. So these wooden ships are flying around with these guys with beards and the balloons and all the stuff. And there's 10,000 reports, and they're all over the United States. And they ask them, where are you from? We're from above the clouds. And then they said, we're from Mars. And so everybody believes, okay, well, they're from Mars because there's canals. And then suddenly, then you get the Foo Fighters. And then the Foo Fighters turn into the green fireballs. Then you have the saucers come, the Adamski, and all that kind of stuff with the 1950s, the humanoid type guys. Then the Greys start in 1961. Then in 1980, the reptilians start. And then we have the crop circles in 1982, and they start very simple. We had the what we call saucer nests in the wheat fields in Canada in the 70s and 60s or whatever. And then suddenly it appears in Great Britain and starts with this very simple thing. And Colin Andrews told me, he said they were flying above after the first two crop circles. And he says to the pilot, this other crop circle guy, he says, I wonder if they could put them together. He said they flew up next day and the two were together. And that's when they realized there was this consciousness thing. So you have the crop circles start and the cattle mutilation stop. And then the cattle mutilation stop. And then you have the ground traces. And there's been a ground trace for 25 years. There's 4,000 ground traces with the pod marks and the burned out fields and stuff like that. And it's almost like they're changing the phenomena as they go along. So once the digital camera came in, suddenly we started getting these orb things. People started reporting these orbs. And I sort of watched them, and I knew there was a connection. Like Chris Bledsoe had orbs. He's filmed the orbs. And then Bob McGuire goes there. And Bob McGuire reports, yeah, there was these orbs flying around his yard, these little things. And then they show me the photograph of Jim Semivan standing by the burning tree with these orbs all around him. So you have this orb story start. So I start gathering the photos or whatever, and I'm looking at it, and I'm not trying to film them or anything. And suddenly I realize there seems to be a connection that you have these orbs, and then you have these people that have this, what I call the mist. So it looks like a ghost coming in. It's like a mist or smoke or whatever in the film. And then I'd get the next person with orbs. I started to talk to people with orbs. You're filming orbs? And there's lots. I say there's at least 1 million photographs around the world that have been taken. There's huge collections. There's a guy by the name of Jeff out of Chicago. He has 211,000 photos. And I basically say, don't you think we should be investigating this? Because there's a definite pattern. I noticed that the people would have these sort of mists coming in, this smoke. So I would say to someone, you're taking orb photographs, and they say, yeah, show me all the photographs. You got any with mists in the photograph? Oh yeah, I got those. And then they would bring out these photographs and they show you this mist. And then I'd ask the next person, you got any with mist? And they go, yeah, I got those photographs. And they'd show you the mist. And then Chris Bledsoe showed me the first beam. It was in 2015. He took this thing. It looked like this beam coming out of the sky, right down and to the earth. And it was very clear. It was like a laser, but it was wide. And I go, that's pretty weird, Chris. And then suddenly it's like the people flying the ship. Suddenly people started showing me these beam photographs. And then I go to people, you got the mist photographs? And they go, yeah. And they wanted to show me the orb photographs. Look at this beautiful orb. And I say, you got the mist photographs? Yeah. You got the beam photographs? Oh, I got those too. Yeah, you want to see those? And everybody had the same thing. I realized there was these patterns that it would go from ordinary orbs, black and white, to colored orbs, to the mist, to the beams, and the more elaborate the collection got. And then you see what Jeff's got. He started getting the beams with like a rainbow thing in it, like this different colors through the beams, or the beam with, you can see the orbs in the beam, the colored orbs. And I started to realize, like, wow, there's these massive collections, and people were blowing them up and seeing faces and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, man, we should investigate this. And then what happened was Bob McGuire got involved. So Bob McGuire is with Lala, and Lala, they started getting these photographs on the whole thing with the orbs. And then he started showing these orbs, and they were photographing. I said, yeah, all these people got them. And we put a group together called Orbology, the study of orbs. And all these people started to gather, and I got the collection out of Scotland. It'd be another pattern would be you go to the woman Tress, her name is in Scotland, who's actually interacting with the beings. She's actually claimed she's interacting, she's flown the ship, all this kind of stuff. She's got unbelievable huge orbs, like the size of the yard, just above the yard and stuff like that. And then I'd say to her, how many have you got? Oh, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands. And I have a girl in Macedonia. How many you got? Thousands. I go every night. I photograph. Got tens of thousands. And you start putting all these collections together, and I started to see they've all got the same thing. And you see this very definite pattern in the thing. And I'm just saying we need to investigate this. I don't. People will say it's dead people. People say it's aliens, and people will say it's the camera. People say, of course, they say it's dust. So then I do the research, and I go, oh, come on, dust. I'm reflecting off the lens or the flash of the digital camera. I look it up. There's 10 million pieces of dust in every cubic centimeter of space. So you got 10 million dust particles in front of the camera lens, and you say that you flash, you wouldn't be able to take a digital camera flash. It would just orbs all over the place. And you see these orbs that are actually almost like they've got intelligence. They're moving around and stuff like that. And I was just so amazed. I called them the new crop circles. We have the crop circles, and now they've moved. Like we had the people who did the light language, which I'll guarantee you, I did not see in the 1970s. These people are going, blah, 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 blah. They're talking this light language, and it's got the tone to it and stuff. And there's orbs flying around these people and stuff like that. And I'm going, this is just like totally weird. These people talking light language, and then the orbs appear, and then I say, maybe this is just a transition from crop circles. They show you this, and you get amazed with this, and everybody gets interested. And all they're trying to do is get you to go, wow. They're trying to get you to realize the world is not what you think it is. The world is a little more complex than what you think it is, and they want you to sort of marvel at the universe and be drawn in by the unknown and stuff like that, to move you away from this. I know everything. I've got all the pieces, almost like Max Planck, the guy that invented quantum physics, where his instructor in 1874, Joly, said, "Oh, you don't go into physics. You're wasting your time. Don't go in. We've got it all figured out. You're not going to have anything to do." That's the attitude that we have, and this is changing the opposite thing. And I'm trying to get people with orbs. I'm saying we got at least a million photographs that I can actually link you to a million photographs. Don't you think we should put it through some AI intelligence thing and look and see what the patterns are or what's going on? There's definitely something going on. And people say, oh, it's just digital cameras. Then I start to look, and I start finding all sorts of photographs from the 70s, from the 60s, from the 40s with orb photographs in them, not as many as digital. It's almost like the digital camera opened up that edge of the spectrum that picks these things up. And as I said, there's at least a million photographs out there. And to me, it's just absolutely unforgivable for people to absolutely ignore that evidence. It's a tremendous amount of people who got, and then now you've got the thing. Now everybody's getting into it. Like I had orbs in the 1970s. We didn't even call them orbs. We didn't even know what they were. I called them ground lights. And I got the first night I got within 50 feet of one of these things. And I was going to jump on it. I've told the story and I won't tell it again. But that's how it started for me. And as we move through to this sort of new thing, I say that, you've got this material, nobody's looking at it, and then suddenly this the Skinwalker book comes out. The Skinwalkers at the Pentagon comes out, and then suddenly they're doing the orbs. All in these orbs, you got to watch out for the orbs. Don't get too close to the orbs. And the blue ones, they're called blue meanies. Don't get the blue meanies are the bad ones. And then of course I go to all the people who got the orb photographs. You got any blue orbs? Like I even posted the one tonight you saw. I said, hey, you got any blue orbs? Oh yeah, we got blue orbs. And I said, did you get eaten? Did you get injured? Right. No. Even Betty Andreasen, who's 6 books written on Betty Andreasen, her main orb, she had an orb that followed her around. It was a blue orb. She called it her protector. All her books, she talks about the blue orbs. So that's the thing, is now the Pentagon's talking about orbs. So I think it's in the ballpark that the Pentagon's not going to look at it. But we've got to say, if the Pentagon's going to put out this story that orbs are bad and orbs are going to injure you, you got to start talking to people who've got hundreds of thousands of orb photographs and find out what they've got to say.
I look at this 2 ways. One, and I think it's much more significant, is that there are orbs that you see with the naked eye. That is significant, whether it's Foo Fighters or whether, ball lightning in the past, or, I've seen one orb. Okay. And it was big, and I saw it with a group of people. We all saw it together. And it started off small and it grew to, I don't know, 30, 40 feet. It was gray. It was 2D, though, by the way. It wasn't a sphere. It was like flat, like a coin.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I saw that with my eyeballs. And then the photography side of this is where I think it gets a little bit sketchy. Some are real. I do agree with that. And I think some of it are just anomalies with digital photography. And the problem that I have with that concept is I'm looking around in my studio right now. I can see, there's dust everywhere. I can see it. So why is it that I can photograph my studio with a digital camera and not see any orbs? So what is, I don't get it, and I'm a little bit confused.
But that's where we need to investigate. So it's an assumption that some of them are going to be anomalies, but that's not been established. Nobody's actually looked at this evidence. Nobody's actually taken these photographs and actually analyzed them. And so we have the orbs that are showing up around people, and you'll hear them in the C5 thing where people are seeing this stuff. But you'll actually get stuff even like you get people will say, "Oh, I can't take an orb photograph," and you got this guy Stokes out of Sedona, Arizona, and he's famous. People go and they pose, and he goes and he takes photographs, and they have the orbs, trying to get orbs on top of their hands and stuff like that. And people say, "I can't," and then he takes their camera and takes photographs, and there's orbs. So it's got something to do with the person. And that's the thing, is the investigation. We need to investigate this. We have more evidence than you could possibly imagine. And some people have, some of the stuff is just unbelievable that they're getting that you wouldn't get with a camera. Like my son just got married and he's got 2 photographers that were working there. And I can guarantee you they took 1,000 photographs. There won't be a single orb in any of these photographs. Right. So why are these things, and the things are moving around, and or you get like piles of them all going in different directions and stuff like that. And it's almost, to me, it's like they got plausible deniability that you can't really prove it or whatever, but they just want you to go like, what's going on here? All this sort of stuff. It's the wow effect. They always like the same thing. Like when I talk about the Nimitz. Okay, so the Nimitz. Why did the Tic Tac drop from 89,000 feet to sea level in 7/8 of a second? Was that an abduction maneuver? Was that they ran out of gas? No, they were showing off. They went, "Watch this!" Or like when the balls, they change it. So they have the orbs, the balls with the squares in them, and they come within a foot of the aircraft. And I can just see, hey, Zogar, I bet you can get closer to the plane than you can. And they're playing games. They're just doing this wow thing. They're trying to get us accustomed to the fact that there's all this weird stuff going on, and people are trying to investigate it. And it gets us to the idea that the reality that we think, the space, 3D space, time and space, this is all going to be wrong. We're not even close. And that's what Eric Davis was saying. They can't even figure this thing out. They can't even get off square one. And when you get into the thing where on the ground, the craft is bigger on the inside, then you got to go like, what is, it just blows your mind. And it drives people like me to do the research. And I'm one of the few people that's actually sort of tried to gather as much of this material as possible and go through it. And you start seeing more patterns and more patterns and more patterns. And it's just, it's a definite phenomena that's going on. And it may just be like the crop circles. Why are they doing crop circles? They're doing crop circles because everybody says, "Oh, it's a hoax. It's not a hoax." But man, how do you do that? Even if you're hoaxing, how do you do that? It's like people are they take photographs of it. Or why did they mutilate the cow? They got the cow on the ship. I mean, you got the cow. Why do you go back and drop it from 100 feet down into the farmer's yard and take one eye out and take the tongue out and stuff like that? Because they want Linda Howe. I told Linda this. So you know why, Linda? Because they want you to go and photograph it. They want everybody to see this. They're giving a message. They're saying a message. They're saying this is downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. And you did above ground tests, and that's what this is all about. Or it's a monitoring operation or whatever it is. And they're trying to motivate people. And so they'll do this, and then they'll do this, and they'll do this. And it's all this weird stuff that's absurd that you can't really prove, that doesn't make any sense. But it just, when you get into it, you can't. The orb people are worse than the UFO people. When you get a UFO person, you know how it is. They end up getting divorced. Their wife thinks they're absolutely crazy. You're reading all these books. You've gone nuts or whatever. The orb people are worse. When a person starts getting orb photographs, they're out every night for hours. And with digital cameras, you can take hundreds of photographs. And you're just going click, click, click. We had an orb party where they were using point and shoot cameras. not even sort of digital, point and shoot cameras. And we were out there in this field with all these mosquitoes, and we're all saying, stand in the same direction. Okay, let's all photograph at the same time to see if we all get the same thing on our cameras and stuff like that. And we took so many photographs, we couldn't sort out which ones were taken in all the same directions. And it was just absurd. Like, these people are just, you can take someone who's done it for a month and say, how many photographs you got? To go 5,000. They just, like, with digital, you can just take one after another. And so there's these huge collections of these orbs, and there's a definite connection to the phenomena. There's no doubt about that, because a lot of the people will say that they have contact, that they're actually in contact with the intelligence behind what's making these things.
Do you think that the reports, and I've seen the lithographs and the woodcuts, that are hundreds of years old, showing what appears to be a ball of light, moving across the ground, and then moving on to reports. It's weird. It's never been photographed, but scientists and so forth talking about ball lightning. And then we have the Foo Fighters. And then, of course, the orbs that we're talking about today. Do you think that all of those are the same thing? We just didn't have the right words for it?
No, I think it's just a variation of the same thing. So the Foo Fighters thing was
the Brown Mountain Lights, for example, right?
Oh yeah, well that's how mine started, because we were like, they used to call them spook lights, and we called them ground lights. And the first night we saw them, what happened was we were waiting for the big ones. I had a guy who had all his camera gear, and he said, I can photograph these big UFOs for you. And I said, okay. We go there, and nothing. We're sitting there waiting. It's after dark. We're waiting. Nothing's happening. And all of a sudden I look around, and there's all these orange lights. And I said, Jim, what's all these orange lights around us? Like, what's going on? I've never seen this before. And then it was like farm lights, but they were orange, as orange as oranges. And that's when we got within a couple of feet of the first one. And that was sort of like a ball. So it was different than now. And I even went I talked to a guy named A.W.L. Bridge, who was the metallurgist for the Canadian government in the early 1950s, when all these pieces were coming from the United States to Canada to be analyzed by Wilbur Smith. They were arriving, and this guy was the guy that did the metallurgical analysis. And I said, how much material did you guys actually handle in the 1950s? And he said, tons of it. And then when he saw the MJ-12 document, this is many years ago, he said, I think I analyzed that piece. He was talking about the Roswell stuff. I think we actually analyzed that piece. But what he said when I said, hey, Art, I said, we got these lights on the ground. I don't know what they are, like spook lights. They're really weird. I got within 50 feet the first night, and it was like a big ball, and it didn't light up anything. It was weird. Again, it's like this idea where the phenomena is absurd. It does really weird things. So this light was this far from the edge of this wooden bridge, and I'm looking at it, and I'm ready to jump on this thing. And I said to my friend, hold the camera. I had an 8mm camera. Hold the camera. I'm going to jump on this thing before it takes off. I'm going to hit it. I'm going to touch it. And I knew I could get burned because the Falcon Lake guy got burned. I said, I don't care. I'm going to touch this thing. But I'm looking at it. I'm going, that is so weird. It was this far from the edge of the bridge, and it was bright. You couldn't even look at it. It was just bright as could be, but it wasn't lighting up the bridge. I thought, that is the weirdest thing. So we called it a dead light. It was like tremendously bright, but now we've got LED lights. In the 1970s, we didn't have LED. Now, when I see LED,
Grant, slow down. I got to keep you focused. How close did you get to the light?
I was close enough that I felt that if I started to run, I would hit it before it could take off.
And then what happened? And so what happened?
Well, I gave the camera to my friend. He said, hang on. He said, I think there's one sitting on top of the car. And I said, what? And there was water in the fields. It was all the fields were just the road. The rest was all water. So I took these binoculars, and I looked at the binoculars, and it was like the sun was looking into the north. And on top of the car was orange, like a half orange. And there was this orange smoke hanging down the side of the car. And I went, there's one on top of the car. And I started to run, and it took about 3 steps. And I go, oh, shit. And I look around, sure enough, the one at the bridge is gone. And so then I figured, well, now we're committed. So we started to run, and it moved onto the front hood, and it looked like the car was on fire. You could see it through the front and through the back window. It was sitting on the front hood. And then it went down onto the road, and then I guess it went into the water. And we could see, we looked around, and there was orange lights, and they were sitting about this high off the water. And it looked like 2 orange lights on top of each other, but it was a reflection off the water. So there's all these orange lights around us, and we were looking at this thing, and then we were at the car, and I didn't know what to do. Just new researcher. It's 1976, and I put my hand on top of the car to see if it's hot. I don't know, what am I supposed to do? Like, this thing was sitting on top of the car. I didn't know what to do. My friend went and looked to see if the keys were still in the car, because he left the keys in the car. And then I said, and I looked back, and I went, Jim, it's back at the bridge. Come on, let's go. Let's walk. Because we had gone to the bridge twice and it had taken off with the car. So the last time we walked, and that's when we got close. I said, come on, let's walk. Yeah, I got close. I want to jump on this thing. He said, no, I want to go home. I said, no, come on, Jim. We got close. I want to go. I want to jump on this thing. He said, no. And it was his car, so we had to go home. I was just furious. And so that ended it. And we only got close one other time, which is really weird that you have these things of blockages of memories. I had one. This is 2 days ago. So I'm writing up the orb story. So I'm writing up how orbs started in the 1970s. Or when I talked to this metallurgist, he said, oh, look, those are called monitors. He said, and I said, oh, yeah, monitors. I didn't want to look stupid. He said, yeah, we had those back in the 1950s. They were monitoring our meetings. They were monitoring what we're doing. He used to sit on the windowsills, and we had caught one in the front in the ditch one time. And Wilbur, all of us saw it when we came out of a meeting and stuff like that. So then he called it monitors. We called it ground lights. Orbs, nobody's talking about orbs at the time. And so we go to now, and we get the orbs now. So I had it from back then. So it's morphed, it's changed. And I think that's what's happened. And then the digitals came in. And to me, I just think it's a phenomena where they're doing all these really weird things, like the mutilations.
Grant, I used to be so skeptical about orbs. I just thought it was bullshit. And I have an open mind about everything. I really do. But when it came to orbs, it's like, man, and then when I'm sitting, this is how it went down. I've told the story too many times. This is the very short version of it. It's 10 o'clock at night, out on this big field. I'm sitting with about 75 people. We're doing a sky watch, right? So we're all sitting in chairs and I come down and I'm at the end. I'm on the right side. The majority of people are to my left, right? 50, 75 people out this way. I've got about 10 people around me. I come in, I sit down in this chair, and I'm looking out over this field, and I see this gray ball come out from behind this tree. It goes up and then comes down, and I'm just watching it, right? And it comes down, and then it comes down to the ground and grows. And as I'm watching it, I've seriously rubbed my eyes, right? I go like this, right? And I look again, still there. And somebody from the back of me, this lady, is anybody looking at that gray orb out there? Right? And I go, you mean this shit is real? Right? I turn around to her, and then I hear the murmur. I hear everybody in the dark. But I hear there's a great, or I hear everybody, and we all watched it together. Now, this wasn't something captured on a digital camera, Grant.
Yeah.
It wasn't me by myself meditating, with sage burning in some meditation room. No, this was a large group of people, and I didn't say anything. I thought I had a floaty in my eye. We all saw it together. That was physical and that was real. And so that forces me, Grant, to go back and listen to what other people are saying and how they are going about this. Because if we go back historically, and it doesn't matter, man, fairies, things in the woods and in the light, there may be something to this phenomenon that isn't our imagination. What I saw was physical.
Okay.
It was real.
Okay, but then my question to you would be, what was it doing?
Now check this out. So remember, I described it as being flat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it comes down, and it was probably not quite a quarter of a mile away, but a couple of 100 yards for sure. And it's pretty big, 30, 40 feet. When it came out, it was just this little gray thing, right? And then it grew. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's just what happened. That's what I saw. But I did. The reason why I say it was 2D is because it was flat. There was no shadow. There wasn't any sphere thing about it. It was like a piece of paper. I don't know how to explain it. But so it's there, and then it faded away. Yeah. It just like went away. So the next day, I got on this motorcycle, and I rode out there to see if there was some trickery afoot, right?
Exactly,
Maybe a piece of film in a tree, a projector, or something. I was thinking, man, I'm being played. No, and when I went out there and saw it, the area the next day, it was much bigger than I thought. The space where the orb was out in the middle of this field. The tree that it came out from behind, that was 50 yards behind it.
Yeah.
It was a bigger distance. At night, you can't judge. You really can't see things. But I tried to debunk it. When you see something like that with your own eyes, and you've got people. When that lady behind me said, "Is anybody looking at that gray orb out there?" I about lost my mind.
Okay, so the point that I'd like to make on this is, I say to you, what was it doing? Same as the second night when I saw a thing in 1975 when it was flying away. I said, that's unreal, man. It's like, whoa, it's like that could be an extraterrestrial from another planet. I'm so happy I came out here, and then I'm like, what's it doing? Just flying along. It's not doing it. And then the thing is, the orb comes. So the orb appears to you, and it goes, wow, look at this. And then it just disappears, and it goes away. And then what do? You go out the next day.
Intention. Yeah. What's the intention? Why the message?
Because it's dragging you in. It's showing off. It's the theory of wow. It wants Jimmy Church to go, wow, and tell everybody what's going on. And everybody tells, and the consciousness rises. It's exactly what happened to Bud Hopkins. Bud Hopkins, his story, 1963. He's driving with his friends on the Cape there, and he's got these people from England, and all of a sudden, boop, this flying saucer's right above the car. And he's looking up in plain daylight, and he's looking at this thing, and he's driving along, and the thing's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. It's just sitting, hey, hello, Bud, here I am. And then it sort of just disappears. And then the next day, what's he do? He goes back there, he redrives the route to see how far it went and stuff like that. And then you start looking at his case, and you start to see all these connections. Like Bud Hopkins was involved in War of the Worlds. Bud Hopkins was always into fear. Oh, they're intruders. They're here, whatever. He was involved in War of the Worlds as a 7-year-old kid. He was looking out the window. The neighbor came over and said, we're going to go up on the hill, because in New Jersey, that's where he lived, in New Jersey.
Right.
So we're going up on the hill, and Bud's looking out the window, and he's looking for the aliens. So he has the fear. They show him in 63. He goes there, and he gets caught. He gets dragged into it. And then in 1975, they get him finally, they make the final thing. He's buying alcohol at the corner store, and the guy says, hey, I saw this weird UFO off the thing, and these guys came out with shovels, and these aliens came out, these people came out with shovels, and they were digging holes, and it's like, come on, it's like they're digging holes, and Bud goes there, and he finds the holes, and that's it. He's sold. He's into the UFO thing. He gets dragged in. They drag him in. I mean, it's these absurd things like aliens with shovels digging holes. I mean, come on, you see these bizarre. But the UFO shows, like, why do UFOs have lights on it? They have lights because they want you to see it. They want you to go, what the heck is that?
But that's such a great point, and I'll tell you why that's such a great point. I did not want to be the orb dude. Grant, I didn't want to tell the story. I didn't want people to go, come on, church. I didn't want that. The experience, when you have that many people around you that go through that experience, and I have the opportunity to talk about it, right, publicly in the media, I can't let them down, right? But what do I do with it? What was the intention? Was it for me to go, well, I saw an orb? Well, it just may be that. I think that's a really, really good point. That was the message, right? To have somebody talk about it, and I was so reticent.
Yeah, they never give you.
I don't want to be the orb dude. I don't want to be the crazy guy. I don't want to be the cat dude. I don't want to be that guy.
They just leave you with enough evidence to make you go, wow. And then they leave you hanging high and dry. They don't give you anything. They don't give you any evidence. They don't leave anything with you. And then you go out and you don't want to do it. It's like Jim Semivan. He's never talked about his orb experience. I wanted to see this photo. I heard about this photo. And all he said because he knew Chris had these orbs around the tree and the burning tree, and he went to Chris's birthday all the time, and he was an experiencer like Chris, and he went down and he thought Chris had the most magnificent story of anybody gone through all this stuff. And then they show him this photograph, and he's standing by the tree with all these orbs around him. And all he says is, I hope they didn't follow me home. Because he's thinking of the hitchhiker thing. Oh, I hope they didn't follow me home. And that's his only comment he's ever made on this orb photograph. I hope they didn't follow me home. And that's where you get is this, that to me, that the whole UFO phenomena, to me, the more I look at it, the more it looks like it's just this absurd thing that's almost like Jacques Vallée. They're manipulating our thought. They're moving us down a certain road. They've done this on 1,000 planets before. Where are the wooden ships that were here in 1895? Well, they're over on another planet doing the same thing again. And then they're going to send in the green fireballs and the Foo Fighters and all this sort of stuff. And they're going to run the whole thing again. That it's just a process that they've been through, and none of it really makes any sense when you get down to it. They could land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going to go on, but that's not what they're doing. They're doing this bizarre thing where, even though the second night, when I didn't think about this till later, the second night the thing came and it was jumping around the sky, and this girl's crying, I can't see it, and this guy's unloading his camera, and he's photographing as this thing's jumping around the sky, and then as it gets in closer, it gets closer, and then suddenly it's this red thing I saw the night before, and it's coming right at us, and it came right into maybe half a mile away, and then it made this turn, and it went off towards the northeast, and it flew off in the northeast, and I was watching. That's when I said, well, what's it doing? And then I'm thinking, like, just this year, I'm thinking to myself, hey, that was kind of weird. If it was on the west and it wanted to go to the northeast, why didn't it just go from there to there? Why did it?
Why does it have to turn? Well, okay. So what do you think ultimately is going on, though? And I'm not talking about contact and giving us, the cure for air pollution. I'm not going there, but there has to be a reason for them showing themselves without firing off plasma death rays and taking over the planet, right? Right? Well, they're not doing anything bad, are they?
No, I think the ultimate goal is this idea that consciousness. They're trying to get across. That's why they're teaching people to fly the ship. Why they don't need to have people flying the ship. They tell me you're flying the ship. They just want them to tell this bizarre story about flying the ship because they want this consciousness connection. They want people to realize consciousness is critical. I remember 2012 when I had the download. I mean, I was ostracized. There's people still in the UFO community thought I lost my marbles. I was totally insane. And now everybody's talking about consciousness. They know. Even the government is confirming, or these high-level people are confirming, yeah, there's a consciousness connection to this thing. So we've moved, and that the consciousness is the key thing. It's the idea that, like Max Planck says, nothing gets behind consciousness. So in the one download I had in 2017, it gave me, is it this or this? It said, not only is what you've got wrong, it's exactly the opposite of what you think. So it said, is the world made out of nuts and bolts? If it's made out of nuts and bolts, that's one world. But if the world's made out of consciousness, that's a completely different world with different rules. And Max Planck says nothing gets behind consciousness. Most people don't realize the guys that started quantum physics, most of them, except for Einstein and a couple other people, were realists. They believed that consciousness was primary, that God creates the sparks of the divine, and we're creating the universe. It's not like God creates the heavens and the earth, the physical thing, and puts the consciousness in. Everything is conscious. We're creating with our mind. So you take in all the experiences you have, you absorb it, you put it back out. Information, the universe is all information. So you take your experience and you put it out, and the universe gets smarter because you've been in the world. You leave the world with more than you brought in. It keeps getting smarter and more intelligent and more magnificent. That's what I think is going on. And I think the number one message they've got, almost everybody says that, the number one message that they have is the oneness message. This idea that unless you realize that everybody's one, everybody's connected, it's game over. Because as long as you believe that that guy's the bad guy and I'm the good guy, I can steal his stuff, I can kill, we're breaking into more and more groups. We're separating. I even made the story like the United States of America was great because it was the United States of America. It is no longer the United States of America. And when it starts to fall apart, when you start getting, different, the blue sides, and the red, all these divisions, you have this division. That's what they're trying to say to us. That's the same with ecology. Ecology is only 100 years old. The idea of ecology, the idea that you could throw stuff in the river and it's my river. I can do whatever I want. I can throw it in. We start to realize that what we put in the river, what we put into the world around us affects the ecosystem, that we can affect it. We can kill all the trees. We can do all this kind of stuff. So it's the idea that what you do to the earth affects it, that you have an effect over the earth. And the same thing that when you're dealing with other people, it's the oneness message that we're all together. It's what Reagan said, how the world would unite if we were faced with an alien invasion. We'd all realize we're just one, that we're all just God's children. That's the idea that they're trying. And whether Reagan got that from them, there was a story that he had an experience, that he actually encountered the beings. Whatever it was, is this idea of oneness. That if you realize that we're all one thing, you can't cut off somebody else's arm. Or the idea that everything is divine. And if you say I'm divine and you're not divine, then you are the darkness pretending to be the light. It's all divine. It's all created by God. It's all one thing.
Okay, so let me jump in. Do you remember Tom DeLonge making that point on the show where he said, be careful of who you're trying to reach out with consciously and call in these ships? You don't know good from bad, and you don't know what their intentions are.
Yeah, well, that's the idea, the fear thing. So if you're into fear, then it's either in your love or in your fear. So if you're in fear, in what I call the national insecurity state, you're going to believe there's these enemies out there, there's bad aliens. And I mean, the aliens have been around, like Jim Simmons said, man, they've been around for like 2,000 years. They haven't done anything yet. I mean, no, I really don't believe they're evil. And yet we've got this mentality. We started it. And the reason it's being pushed in the United States is because it's the military industrial complex thing that's pushing it. It's saying they're a threat. We have to, it's the idea. Well, we can, Lou Elizondo's expression. Well, if there's footprints in your crossing your carpet, well, then you have to think there's a potential threat, and they're a potential threat. Well, the U.S. military, everything's a potential threat. It doesn't matter. God's a potential threat. The angels are, everything's a potential threat, because you come into this insecurity thing. So the more insecure you get, the more weapons you get, the bigger your defense budget gets, and it sort of builds. And then it's what Eisenhower said: beware the military-industrial congressional complex, where the idea was once Congress gets involved, then they've got unlimited amounts of money, because you're building stuff and you've got money in your district that's being spent on the project. You're not going to vote against it. It's like the F-35 jet fighter is made in 46 different states. And the reason the F-35 jet fighter is made in 46 different states is because no senator is going to vote against it if suddenly there's massive overruns or whatever. That's how it works. And it's this fear thing that we're afraid there's me and you, and the idea there's not me and you, that anybody who's had the out-of-body experience or the psychedelic experience, where the ayahuasca, where they say, I suddenly realized everything was alive, conscious, and one. And that's the idea of the oneness, where they put their hand on the craft and they become one with the craft. That is, to me, is the ultimate message of the beings, that unless you realize that you are all connected, you are all one thing. It's like people say, oh, but there's evil aliens. And I say, okay, so if reincarnation is a fact, and if Jimmy Church dies tomorrow and you get born tomorrow as a gray alien, is Jimmy Church now an evil guy? This is nonsense. We're into this race thing. There's this race, and we're the good race, and it changes. The Japanese used to be the bad race. Now they're good guys because they buy our cars, and they're all great guys, and it changes. What the evil will evaporate from the Japanese or the Germans? I mean, we used to think they were evil guys, and we put that label on them because that enables us to kill them. If you realize that everybody's one thing, we're all connected, and it's all one thing, that you could be born as one of whatever. I always warn people, whatever race you're afraid of, whatever race you really hate, get ready, because your next lifetime you may be learning empathy, and you may be walking in their shoes. And that's how it works. You understand this idea that we're all one thing, and that's the message you're saying. As long as you're fighting with each other and trying to get bigger economies, it's like even the idea of free energy. Everything's free energy, but say you get the free energy. We want the free energy because we want to be able to strip the leaves off the trees twice as fast as we're stripping them off right now. It's this idea, and it's almost like it's the attitude that is wrong. It's the idea that we're going to get this technology, and we're going to get bigger and have more cars and more of this, more of that. And they're basically saying that you are working in this world where it is winding down. You guys are just running the world into the ground. And it's this idea of separation. My idea is that the only thing that I believe is evil in the modern world is one thing and one thing only: the mistaken belief in separation. If you actually believe that you're separate from somebody else, you're not separate from somebody else. When you harm somebody else, you cut off your own arm. It's basically that simple, that we're all connected. We all come from the same source. And that's the message that absolutely they are trying to get across.
Why do you think the leaks have stopped? we had a leakage problem with the Department of Defense and Capitol Hill. Everybody was talking, everything was leaking, and suddenly we don't have that now. Why the leaks were coming from the Department of Defense? That was, you know what I mean? We weren't going there and stealing stuff. They were leaking it to the media and members of the community. Why have the leaks stopped?
Well, I think most of the leaks were coming from people that were on the outside, like Lou Elizondo and Mellon and stuff. It's like I'm not saying, but there's more videos and stuff that all came from them. But I think what it may be is that you have this roadblock where the forces that control this phenomena are saying, to hell with you. We are not going to release this. And there's this roadblock where everything is stalled, where they're trying to negotiate behind the scenes. And that's why everything is basically, I think, broken down in terms of getting the stuff out. It's not like there's a river and we're moving to the next step and we're going to have this report and then we're going to have that report. It's sort of like, okay, you had your one report. Now the forces that control this thing, who have it, are saying this is national security stuff. We're going to stop this nonsense. And the Congress is handicapped because half the guys are packing up to go home. They haven't been elected. They've lost their seat. They're waiting for the next one. It's like when the Canadian disclosure thing happened, they told us it has to happen before September the 7th. This was the opposition party that was behind this Canadian disclosure initiative with 10 MPs. They said it has to happen before September the 7th. And the reason was because the Congressional party, that the Conservative party that they're a part of, was electing a new leader. And they basically said to us, after September the 7th, we have no idea what's going to happen. So it has to happen before September the 7th. The same as here is once a new Congress comes in, you have no idea what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to head the committees or what they're going to want to investigate or whatever. It all falls apart and you got to start building it up again. Now we've got all the right people, but half the people that are involved in the disclosure thing on the government side are lost their seat or they've retired or that's the thing is there's different committees. There's going to be the Intelligence Committee, the Armed Services Committee that were running this thing in the House and the Senate. They're going to have new leadership. It's all going to be Republican leadership. And if the Republican leadership decides that it's more important to go after Biden's laptop or whatever, forget it. They're just not going to do it. The priorities all change. That's what the Canadians told us. After September the 7th, it's over. You got to do it before September the 7th. So we decided to do August 26th, and then it all fell apart over this thing about whether we were going to do a scientific or a military investigation.
The other part about this, though, is where you've got so many researchers out there. John Greenwald, comes to mind first, that are doing FOIAs, chasing things down, and we have specifically now search terms that we didn't have before. And UAP and videos and UAP task force. We have certain areas to go into. It seems that there would be a lot of documents being exposed where even that has slowed down. I don't know if there's going to be any hearings anymore. The chatter of that, there isn't any political upsmanship, going on and trying to gain an advantage here. Everything seems to have simmered down. Like somebody flipped the switch. They flipped the switch to on in 2017, didn't they? Somebody certainly flipped that switch and said, the floodgates are open. That switch has been turned off.
Yeah, but I think it's basically got to do with the fact that we've had an election and everything's sort of switching from one party to the other in terms of who sets up the committees and stuff like that.
But we just had a hearing 6 months ago, and that wasn't motivated. The chatter was high, Grant. I just don't understand who is deciding this subject.
Well, but it would break down because you got to run for election. So in the last couple of months, everybody's been spending $50 or $100 million to win their seat, and they're busy doing their election, and they're not even in Washington, and they're on recess and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not really surprised. It's a thing that's going to take many years, and I think I'm encouraged by one thing. You mentioned there's no documents. Well, you talk about John Greenwald. He had the thing with the Obama administration where he filed, and they told him 26,000 pages. Well, I'll tell you, I filed before John Greenwald, about long before John Greenwald. I'm getting my documents for John Greenwald. I've got all sorts of reports. For example, I call it the Three Kings: McCaslin, McKay, and Robert Weiss. I filed FOIs with the Obama administration for documents, and I've got stuff coming out of classified files. So they give you, first of all, the unclassified files, then the classified files. I filed on Tim Taylor because there was a rumor that Tim Taylor briefed the president of the United States on Chris Bledsoe. So, of course, I filed for Tim Taylor. All the documents on Tim Taylor, there's like 400 pages or something like that. So I've got all sorts of these FOIAs. I've got thousands of pages of documents that are coming. The Clinton stuff is about to go online. I had the Clinton stuff, and I was really not really that interested in it, so I really didn't pay attention to it. But they're putting it online on some of these guys that do the online stuff, and I'm really impressed with the new generation. I remember, like, I called them the young guns. These young people are really, it's a different world. I mean, they know how to use computers. They know how to do the searches. And you remember back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, I mean, we were doing it by snail mail. You'd put out a letter to someone and wait for 2 weeks for something to come back. Now it's moving at the speed of light. And I'm really encouraged by these young people who know what they're doing and they're pushing. And the internet has really cut the half-life of this disclosure thing down, that there's so many people pressing, there's so many people finding stuff. And doing interviews and doing podcasts and stuff. There's just so much material. It's impossible even to keep up with in terms of what they're doing, and it's all young people that are doing it. So I'm really encouraged. We used to have this joke where they said, you know, is there a discount in the conference for senior citizens? And then the organizer said, no, if we had that, everybody would get a discount. Now it's like it's not the old gray-haired people anymore. It's the young people, and I'm pretty encouraged by the smartness of some of these people and the aggressiveness of what they're doing. And they know how the game's played and they know who is working. And I think I'm pretty encouraged that it may take time, but whoever would have believed. I remember telling, I told a story when Steve Bassett said at one conference, all the people on stage, all the speakers, when is disclosure going to take place? And people said 6 months, they said a year. And it came to me, and I didn't want to embarrass Steve by saying never. So I said 2042. I was floored in 2017 when it was disclosed. So now you say, when will the disclosure take place? And I said, I would not be surprised if it happens tomorrow morning, because I was totally taken off guard by the first time. And I believed it wasn't going to happen. And I believe there's so many people, and the internet, it's almost like the Akashic files. There's so much material on the internet that you can search, and it's very hard to keep a secret now compared to the way it was before. I'm very encouraged by the young people and the pressure that they are putting on this subject to get answers.
So Tim Taylor, that's his real name. Tim Taylor isn't Travis Taylor.
No, Travis Taylor is NASA, but Tim Taylor is Tyler D in American Cosmos.
Tyler D, right? I always thought that was Travis Taylor. So you're saying Tim Taylor is his real name. He was a real dude, and you've got 400 pages coming in from a FOIA.
Yeah. But again, it may not have anything to do. It may have to do with something totally different or whatever. I just put the name. So the way I do my FOIAs when I go after the presidential stuff is you just throw darts. So you put in, of course, like McCaslin. Give me everything on McCaslin. Give me everything on Royce. Give me everything on McKay. Give me everything on Tom DeLonge. Give me everything on, and you just file every name you can possibly think of. And it's not costing you anything. And it's all done digitally. And it's going to take, a couple months or a couple of years for it to happen. But that's all going to be unraveled. And I think we're going to find some stuff that we didn't know. But the government has already been, like, from 1948, we already knew when Truman brought his new air advisor in. He said, I want a briefing on UFOs every 3 months orally, and I want you to go to the CIA. So in 1948, they already knew not to keep files on UFOs. So a lot of this would be done orally. I mean, it's not to get over optimistic that they've written all the stuff down or whatever. But I'm optimistic that there's going to be a lot of stuff coming, because Obama was really into it. There's no doubt about it. And Podesta, we know that Podesta was heavily influencing. I can't remember how many pages on Podesta. There's a lot of pages on Podesta I'm getting as well. So we'll see. And I asked, same as when John Greenwald filed on UFOs, all this kind of stuff, I think they said 26,000 pages. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out of the Obama administration, because there's a lot of people interested. It's not like the old days where nobody talked about it. Obama came out and declassified Area 51 by talking about it. And so a lot of people, it was sort of open, and it's more of an atmosphere where you can talk about UFOs today after 2017 than before. And that's the fastest thing for disclosure, is the fact that it's no longer an issue that ostracizes you. You can talk about it in the halls of the Pentagon. You can talk about it in DARPA. You can talk about it in a university. It's now no longer John Mack, where you're going to get thrown out. You can now talk about it. You've got the Harvard study, all this kind of stuff. It's a different world than it was. It's moving faster than I could ever possibly imagine. And I think that's because of the technology and the internet, and the people know how to work it. And I think we're getting disclosure. I never believed this would happen. Never in my life. Not a chance.
Yeah, we're here for sure. It's a different time. On my show, Into the Vortex, last week I had on Avi Loeb, and to sit down with Avi in person, it's one thing on, with cameras and the internet, but it's another thing to sit down and break bread and have dinner and things. And his commitment to this, when you're looking at somebody face to face and you see how serious he is about this subject, we've definitely turned the page, Grant. You're 100% on that. You're
and you just dragged the people in, like you talked about the orbs, and so I knew that Bob McGuire was interested. Bob McGuire's had these 2 download experiences like I had that both led to billion-dollar corporations. So Bob McGuire's a smart guy, and he's into this. You talk about me being into orbs. He's into this big time. Him and his girlfriend are like, they're just totally obsessed with this. And I said, Bob, do you think you can get a piece of equipment that will detect this? Can you figure out what's going on? And I guarantee he's working on it. He even had one with the orb where there's a sound, and he told me what the frequency of the sound was. He's the smartest guy in the room, and I'm pressuring him now. Come on, and you're dragging a few more people to look at this who get interested, and sooner or later we're going to have technology to tell us whether it's just dust or whether it's really something or whatever. But the thing is to look at it, and I'm really happy that Bob McGuire is actually on the ball, and he's obsessed with this, and he's going to try to figure this thing out.
Thank you so much, Grant. Behave and be well. Be safe, and happy holidays. All right. And the book is UFO Sky Pilots. The next book, when is it coming out?
Well, within the next month, and it's called Weird Ports and Manifestations.
That's what I'm talking about. Grant Cameron. Hey, Grant, take a breath.
I had lots of coffee today. I'm ready to go.
You're the best. Thank you so much,
Thank
Grant.
you, Jimmy. I appreciate your interest.
You're the best. Grant Cameron. Presidential UFOs is the website. And of course, you can follow Grant, over on Facebook and Twitter as well. Absolutely fantastic information tonight. Thank you so much, Grant. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Another episode of Fade to Black in the can. Thank you, Grant. Tomorrow night, I've got David Marler here. Tomorrow night. Wednesday night, Melinda Leslie. And Thursday, I'm doing the Jimmy Church deep dive into the Fermi paradox. Great week coming up on Fade to Black. Fade to Black is produced by LJ Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Announcers are Steve Harder. Oh, I don't have any announcers anymore. Yeah. Webmasters, Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2022 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. Till tomorrow night with David Marler, I want everybody to be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.